Imagine this. You are an astronomer working the night shift at one of the most advanced radio telescope arrays on Earth. Your job is usually quiet and routine. You monitor distant stars and galaxies, hoping to catch something unusual. But tonight something happens that will change everything you thought you knew about our place in the universe. At exactly 2:47 a.m. your screen lights up with a signal unlike anything you have ever seen before. Your hands start shaking. Your heart pounds in your chest. You check the readings again and again because what you are seeing should not be possible. The signal is coming from an object that does not belong to our solar system. An object that traveled through the vast emptiness of space for possibly millions of years. And now it is sending us a message. This is not science fiction. This is not a movie. This is the story of what happened when 3I Atlas arrived in our cosmic neighborhood and why NASA held an emergency meeting that was kept secret from the public for months. Before we dive into video, please subscribe to my channel. Before we dive into what happened during that classified meeting, we need to understand what 3I Atlas actually is and why it caused such panic among the scientific community. The designation 3I means third interstellar object. The I stands for interstellar, which means it came from beyond our solar system, from the space between the stars. You might have heard about the first interstellar visitor called Oumuamua that passed through our solar system back in 2017. That object was strange enough on its own. It had an unusual cigar shape, and it seemed to accelerate in ways that could not be fully explained by normal physics. Scientists debated for years whether it was just a weird asteroid or comet, or possibly something else entirely. Then in 2019, we detected the second interstellar object, called 2I Borisov, which turned out to be a more normal-looking comet. But 3I Atlas was different from both of these in ways that made even the most skeptical scientists stop and question everything. The Atlas Survey System, which stands for Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, first detected the object in March of 2023. At first, it seemed like just another dim spot moving across the sky. The automated systems flagged it as unusual because of its trajectory. When astronomers calculated its orbit, they realized immediately that this object was not bound by the sun's gravity. It was moving too fast and at the wrong angle. It had to have come from interstellar space. The discovery alone was exciting enough to make headlines. After all, interstellar objects are incredibly rare. Space is so vast, and the distances between stars are so enormous that having these cosmic visitors pass through our small corner of the galaxy is like winning the lottery. But the real story was just beginning. As more telescopes around the world turned their attention to 3I Atlas, astronomers started gathering data about its size and composition and speed. The object was roughly 400 meters long, which is about the size of a large building or small mountain. It was tumbling through space, rotating in a complex pattern that suggested it might have been knocked off course by some violent event, perhaps a collision or explosion in its home star system billions of years ago. Spectroscopic analysis revealed that its surface contained materials that were not quite like anything we have in our solar system. There were hints of organic compounds and unusual crystalline structures that reflected light in unexpected ways. Some scientists started calling it the most alien object we had ever observed, and they meant that literally. But here is where things get really interesting. On April 15, 2023, at around 2:47 a.m. Eastern Time, a radio telescope array in New Mexico picked up something extraordinary. The array is part of a network that searches for signals from space, both natural and potentially artificial. The detection system automatically scans through millions of frequency channels, looking for patterns that stand out from the random noise of the universe. That night, the computers detected a narrow band signal coming from the exact position of 3I Atlas. A narrow band signal means the radio waves were concentrated in a very specific frequency rather than spread out across many frequencies. This is important because natural cosmic objects like stars and gas clouds produce radio waves across a broad spectrum. Narrow band signals are the hallmark of technology. They are what you would expect from a transmitter or communication device. The astronomer on duty that night later described in a leaked email how she felt when she saw the detection. She said her first thought was that it had to be a mistake or interference from a satellite or ground-based radio source. She spent the next hour ruling out every possible source of contamination. She checked if any satellites were in that part of the sky. She verified that no aircraft were nearby. She confirmed that no Earth-based transmitters were broadcasting on that frequency. Every test came back negative. The signal was really coming from 3I Atlas. By dawn, she had called her supervisor, who immediately contacted the director of the facility. Within 12 hours, the information had reached NASA headquarters. Within 24 hours, a small group of scientists and officials had been quietly assembled for an emergency consultation. Now you might be wondering why this was kept secret. Why did NASA not immediately announce to the world that we had detected a signal from an interstellar object? The answer is complicated, and it involves protocols that were established decades ago during the early days of SETI, which stands for Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. These protocols state that any detection of a potential extraterrestrial signal must be thoroughly verified before public announcement. The scientific community wants to avoid false alarms that could cause panic or embarrassment. Remember the excitement and then disappointment around various signal detections in the past. The most famous was the WOW signal detected in 1977, which lasted 72 seconds and has never been explained or repeated. Scientists did not want to announce a potential alien signal only to discover later it was just some unusual natural phenomenon or equipment malfunction. So, a small team was assembled in secret to analyze the signal from E3I Atlas. This team included radio, astronomers and physicists and experts in signal processing, and even a few specialists in cryptography and linguistics just in case the signal turned out to contain information. They were given access to every major radio telescope that could observe 3I Atlas. For the next 2 weeks, they monitored the object constantly, and the signal kept coming. It was not continuous, but instead came in bursts that lasted anywhere from a few seconds to several minutes. The bursts seemed to follow a pattern, though not one that anyone could immediately decode. The signal strength varied in a way that suggested it might be rotating with the tumbling motion of the object itself, as if there was a transmitter on the surface that pointed toward Earth only during certain parts of its rotation. The team working on this made several key observations that deepened the mystery rather than solving it. First, they confirmed beyond any doubt that the signal was coming from 3I Atlas and not from any human-made source. They used a technique called interferometry, where multiple telescopes separated by large distances observe the same object simultaneously. By comparing the tiny differences in when the signal arrives at each telescope, you can pinpoint its location with extreme precision. The signal source matched the position of 3I Atlas to within a fraction of a degree. Second, they found that the signal frequency was shifting in exactly the way you would expect from the Doppler effect as the object moved relative to Earth. This was additional proof that the source was moving with the object through space. Third, and most disturbing, they discovered that the signal seemed to change slightly over time, as if it was responding or adapting to something. This last point is what really scared some members of the team. On the 5th day of observation, one of the radio telescopes transmitted a brief test signal toward 3I Atlas. This was done without full authorization, and the person who did it later faced serious consequences. But what happened next was undeniable. Approximately 8 hours later, which is roughly the time it would take for a radio signal to travel to 3I Atlas and back at the speed of light, the pattern of bursts from the object changed. The new pattern had mathematical properties that seemed too organized to be coincidence. Some team members argued this could still be natural behavior that just happened to change at that time, but others believed they were seeing evidence of responsive behavior, evidence that something on or inside 3I Atlas had detected our transmission and was reacting to it. It was at this point that NASA leadership made the decision to convene a formal classified meeting. This was not just the scientific team anymore, but included representatives from the Department of Defense and the National Security Council and international partners from space agencies in Europe and Japan and other countries. The meeting was held at a secure facility, and all participants had to sign non-disclosure agreements. Even today, most of what was discussed in that meeting remains classified. But thanks to several leaks and Freedom of Information Act requests and testimonies from people who were there, we now know at least some of what was said. The meeting opened with a presentation of all the data that had been collected about 3I Atlas and its mysterious signal. The scientists explained that they had explored every possible natural explanation for the signal, and none of them fit the observations satisfactorily. Could it be some kind of plasma effect or electromagnetic phenomenon generated by the unusual materials on the object's surface? Possibly, but that would not explain the pattern changes or the apparent response to our transmission. Could it be that the object was not really interstellar, but was instead some secret satellite or probe from another country? No, because the trajectory clearly showed it came from outside the solar system, and no, human technology could have sent something on that path decades or centuries ago when it would have had to start its journey. This left them with three main hypotheses. First, that 3I Atlas was carrying some kind of natural process that generated radio signals in a way we do not yet understand. This was the most conservative explanation, but it required inventing new physics that had never been observed before. Second, that 3I Atlas was a piece of alien technology, perhaps a probe or derelict spacecraft, that was still partially functional after an unimaginably long journey through space. Third, and most unsettling, that 3I Atlas was an active alien probe, deliberately sent to explore our region of space, or possibly even specifically targeted at our solar system, and that it was now aware of our presence. The debate in that room became heated according to those who were present. Some argued that even discussing the possibility of alien technology was premature and unscientific. Others pointed out that once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. The representatives from the military and security agencies were concerned about entirely different questions. If this was alien technology, could it be a threat? Should we continue trying to communicate with it, or would that be dangerous? What if this object was surveying Earth for some unknown purpose? What if more objects like it were coming? One of the most dramatic moments in the meeting came when a radio astronomer presented an analysis of the signal's information content. Using techniques from information theory, she had calculated how much data the signal could theoretically carry. Her conclusion was that the patterns in the signal had enough complexity to encode substantial amounts of information, far more than you would expect from a simple beacon or random noise. She had attempted to decode the signal using every method she could think of, treating it as binary code, or prime number sequences, or mathematical constants, or pictorial data. Nothing worked. But the information was there waiting to be understood, if only they could find the key. Then someone asked the question that everyone had been thinking, but nobody wanted to say out loud. What if we are not the intended recipients? What if 3I Atlas is not trying to communicate with us at all, but is instead transmitting data to someone else? Maybe it was sending reports back to wherever it came from. Maybe it was calling out to other probes in a network spread across the galaxy. Or maybe it had detected something else in our solar system that we were not aware of, and was communicating with that. This thought sent chills through the room. As the meeting continued over several days, the group had to make decisions about what to do next. They decided to continue monitoring the object for as long as it remained in range. They also agreed to coordinate observations with radio telescopes around the world to make sure they captured as much data as possible. There was intense discussion about whether to send another deliberate transmission toward Atlas. Some argued that we had already potentially revealed our presence, so we might as well try to establish real communication. Others insisted that we should remain silent and just listen. In the end, they compromised by preparing a message, but not sending it yet. The message was designed by a team of scientists and included basic mathematical concepts and information about Earth and humanity. It was ready to transmit at a moment's notice if the situation changed. Meanwhile, 3I Atlas continued on its path through our solar system. Unlike Oumuamua, which had already been leaving when we discovered it, or Borisov, which passed by at a distance, 3I Atlas was on a trajectory that would bring it relatively close to Earth, not dangerously close but near enough that larger telescopes could potentially see surface details if the object had any. Optical observations were ramped up. The Hubble Space Telescope was used to capture the highest resolution images possible. What they saw was puzzling. The object appeared to have an irregular, lumpy shape, but there were also areas that seemed almost too smooth or geometric. Some researchers thought they could see straight edges or right angles, though the images were not quite clear enough to be certain. It looked like a natural asteroid that had been modified, or like something artificial. that had been heavily damaged and worn down by eons of cosmic radiation and micrometeorite impacts. By late May 2023, the signal from 3I Atlas had grown weaker as the object moved farther from Earth. The rotation pattern had also changed, and there were longer gaps between bursts. Some feared that whatever power source was driving the transmitter might be running out after an incredible span of time, operating in the void between stars. A few telescopes caught what might have been one final strong burst on May 28th, and then silence. Despite days of continued observation, no further signals were detected. 3I Atlas had gone quiet. This created a new dilemma for NASA and the others involved in the secret investigation. The object was moving away and would soon be too far and too faint to study in detail. Should they go public with what they had learned? The problem was they had not really learned anything definitive. They had lots of data and observations that were highly unusual and suggestive, but no proof of what the object really was or what the signal meant. If they announced it to the world, they would create a sensation and raise questions they could not answer. Scientists would be accused of hiding information, or speculation would run wild. On the other hand, keeping it completely secret seemed wrong, especially as rumors were already starting to leak out. In the end, NASA decided on a limited disclosure. In mid-June 2023, they released a brief statement saying that unusual radio emissions had been detected from the interstellar object 3I Atlas, and that these emissions were under study. They emphasized that there were many possible natural explanations and that more research was needed. The statement was carefully worded to be technically true while revealing as little as possible. As expected, the announcement made headlines for a few days. Speculation ranged from alien probes to new physics to elaborate hoaxes. But without dramatic new developments, the story faded from public attention within a week or two. Most people moved on to other news. The scientific team continued their work in private. Over the following months, additional analysis of the recorded signals was conducted. Supercomputers were used to search for patterns that human researchers might have missed. Some interesting correlations were found. The signal seemed to have mathematical properties related to prime numbers and the Fibonacci sequence and other fundamental constants. But whether this was intentional encoding or just coincidence remained unclear. Attempts to match the signal to known physical processes like pulsar emissions or magnetar bursts failed. The signal was genuinely unlike anything in the catalogue of cosmic radio sources. There was also the question of where 3I Atlas came from. Astronomers traced its trajectory backward through space accounting for the gravitational influences of nearby stars. The calculations were difficult because interstellar space is not completely empty, and the object could have had its path altered by close encounters with rogue planets or unseen brown dwarfs over the course of its journey. The best estimates suggested it had been traveling for at least 100,000 years and possibly much longer. Its origin point appeared to be in the direction of a star system about 300 light-years away, but there were large uncertainties in this calculation. It was possible the object came from even farther away, or from a completely different direction, if its path had been significantly altered. Some researchers became obsessed with the object and its signal. They devoted every spare moment to analyzing the data, looking for the insight that would crack the code. One team tried treating the signal as genetic information, like DNA, and found that it could theoretically then code instructions for building complex molecules, though whether this was intentional or just mathematical coincidence was impossible to say. Another team created computer simulations of different types of alien intelligence and how they might structure a message. None of these simulations produced anything that matched the actual signal from 3I Atlas. It was as if the object was playing by rules that no one on Earth understood. By early 2024, 3I Atlas had passed beyond the orbit of Jupiter and was heading back into interstellar space. It would eventually leave our solar system entirely and continue its lonely journey through the galaxy. Barring some unexpected change in course, we would never see it again. The last detailed observations were made in March 2024, exactly 1 year after its discovery. Some of the world's most powerful radio telescopes made a final attempt to detect any signal from the distant object. For hours they listened to nothing but cosmic static. For hours they listened to nothing but cosmic static.